Hello, everyone. We are very excited to have you all here today. My name is Aylin, and I'm a product manager for Actions on Google.
And I'm Nick Felker. I'm a developer programs engineer for the Google Assistant and IoT.
Today, we will talk about best practices for testing your actions and the tools we have built to make it easier for you. But before getting into details, I want to mention why testing is so important. It's important because your users care about it. How do we know that? By looking at play reviews, we noticed 42% of the users mention app stability and bugs in their one-star review. And 62% of the users uninstall the app if they notice crash, freeze, or an error. On the flip side, though, 73% of the users mention speed, design, and usability in their 5-star review. So this tells us users want 5-star apps. And this has been the trend we have been seeing in mobile world. And it's no different when it comes to actions. So today, we will walk you through some tips and tools that will let you build your own 5-star actions. Our journey today starts with Jane. Jane is a Node.js developer. She works on a startup, and she wants to build her own action. Her action is called Trailblazer, and Trailblazer will return nearby bike trails for a given user location. So together, we'll start our journey designing and building Trailblazer with Dialogflow. Then we will test it locally by using Simulator. And we'll show you how you can write your own unit test for your actions by using automated testing library. And we'll show you how you can test your actions with your own users by using alpha and beta release environments. This is something we just announced yesterday, and we are super excited to show you the details later today in the session. And once you deploy your action to production, we'll show you some tools like health analytics and stack driver logging to make sure your actions remain healthy throughout the life cycle. Awesome. Let's start with design and build. So we'll do that with Dialogflow. Dialogflow enables you to build rich conversational experiences. How does it do that? It gives you natural language processing out of the box. So it takes unstructured user response, and it automatically matches that to intents and entities you defined. And you can handle this in your own server. So as a developer, you don't need to worry about knowing or writing your own machine learning models. It just works for you if you use Dialogflow. Let's see what it means for Trailblazer. So as you can see, Dialogflow sits in between Assistant server and your own server. So for Trailblazer, we use Google Cloud Platform to build our own server logic. So when user says, talk to Trailblazer, Assistant server takes that response and takes our welcome intent from Dialogflow and returns back to user. So after that point, user may say, find me a nearby bike trails, or where are the nearby bike trails, and multiple other variations of these type of text responses. And then Dialogflow automatically match that to intent we defined. Let's call it find trails. And that intent may be reading the logic from our own server. Our own server, we may have the location services, we find the trails, and we respond back to user. And we don't need to worry about natural language processing.
Thank you. So now that you've built your action, how do you start testing it? Well, the first step is to use the Actions on Google simulator. And this works on your laptop or on your desktop. And you can also test on your device if you have a home or a phone. You can enter text or you can just talk to it, and you'll get the response that you expect. And you can do extra things like changing the user's language and their location. How does this work? Let's go to the demo. All right, let's go to the demo. And click on the simulator tab here. We're going to jump right here into the action. We're going to say talk to Trailblazer. All right. We can say find trails nearby. You notice I did make a typo there, but Dialogflow is going to be able to map it to the intent regardless. You can look. We have a request and response tab on the side, and that will help you debug your actions. We'll say yes. Show the location. You notice in the top right corner, I've actually mapped it to my hometown of Glassboro, so you can actually show the different types of locations as well. In the display tab, you notice that it has picked a park that is pretty close to where I used to live. And that's a very basic overview of how the simulator works. Now let's go back to the slides for a second. So you can do this and manually test your actions every time you make a change. But as actions grow more complicated, you want to make sure that users continue to have a reliable experience. And to make this easier, we are introducing the automated testing library for actions on Google. So if you're familiar with Node.js, then you'll be familiar with using this testing library. It's written with Node.js. It supports all of the actions on Google locales. And it works with your existing testing infrastructure, whether that's a linter or continuous integration. All of those things work out of the box. So there's 3 key features that this library will do for developers. First, you can send text queries to your action. And this can be unstructured queries, exactly what the user would say. And this is important because users can say anything to your conversation, and you want to make sure that you can handle that. You're going to get back SSML, text, rich responses, and everything else that you would expect. And it uses your account to send the queries. So things like user storage and the last time you visited the action will be exactly what it would be for yourself. How is this going to work for you as a developer? Let's switch over to the demo, and I'll show you. So you notice I've got this test.js file here. And we'll just go down. So first, we import the library. And we're going to instantiate it. We're going to pass in my user credentials. So it's going to talk to this action as myself. And we start a test. And we give the test a name. We can also set things like the location. So we can change the location and see how the action performs in different areas. And then we're going to start by returning a promise that will start the conversation with Trailblazer. We're going to go and send this query, find trails nearby. And then we're going to send yes after it asks for our location. You make sure you also try no and test different flows with different permissions. At the very end, we're going to get back text-to-speech and cards. And you can do assertions to verify that those are exactly what we'd expect. At the very end, you end the test. How does this work? Let's go over here and run npm test. OK, so now we started our test. And in a few seconds, it's going to send talk to Trailblazer. And we're going to get back a response. OK. And you see a variety of parameters in that response. It's a mic open, text-to-speech, SSML cards, etc. OK, so we send found trails nearby. We're going to get back that thing. We're just going to ask for permission to use our location. We'll say yes. OK, and then at the end, you see we've got the card, we've got the text, and everything else from our action. At the very bottom, you see that it says 1 test passes. All right, there you go. So using this tool, you will be able to more easily verify that your actions do exactly what you'd expect. So let's switch back to the slides.
Awesome. So far, we built Trailblazer, and we tested it locally in our simulator. And we wrote our own unit test and make sure they were all green. But it is always important as a developer to test your actions with your own users. Why? Because they may find bugs and usability issues that you didn't think or you didn't catch. Let's see how you can do it by utilizing our new alpha and beta release environments. So alpha is the quickest way to test your actions. Once you submit alpha, it doesn't go through the review process. So it can be live just in a couple hours. And you can invite your friends, family, and your teammates up to 20 testers. And you can iterate by releasing alpha and acting on the feedback from your users, and keep this iteration going on until you have the stable version. And once you have the stable version, you can submit that for beta release. Beta is live after going through regular Google review process. So your actions would be live if they are approved after the review. But once they are approved, you don't need to go through additional review to deploy those to production. So as a developer, you can decide when to deploy this to public audience at your own flexible timing. And you can invite wider audience for your beta release, up to 200 users. Awesome. Let's see how that works in action. Let's go back to demo mode. Perfect. So let's take it from where we left off in simulator. So now you can see a new release tab in the left-hand side navigation in the Actions console. Let's go ahead and click that. And you'll see, aside from production, we also have now alpha and beta release. These are totally optional. You don't need to utilize those. But since you are in this session today, I'm sure you care about testing your actions with your own users. And before getting into the details of alpha, I just want to show you the versions I already deployed before. So currently, I have 3 different versions, once in alpha, once in beta, and once in production that is already deployed to my users. So let's go ahead and deploy an alpha together. But before doing so, let's change something in our actions so we can tell our users if they like the new change. So now you see the actions under the build section. I'll go ahead and click that. And if you are familiar with the action console, you may notice that we just redesigned the whole UI for you to make it easier for your navigation. So we'll see our default welcome intent here that we already built with Dialogflow. I'll click on that, and it gives me option to edit that in Dialogflow. Let's see how that looks like. So this is my welcome intent, but we also have other intents that I mentioned to you before that we can handle in our server. So I'll go back and go to default welcome intent. So right now, our welcome message to the users says, "Good day from Trailblazer." Let's change that, and let's see if our alpha testers would like it. So instead of Trailblazer, let's say, "Good day from Google I/O stage 7." So I'll save this. And after it is saved, I can go ahead and see how that works by clicking right-hand side. And this is going to bring my draft version into the simulator to see the changes that I just did. So let's see, talk to Trailblazer. And let's make sure it's reading from the draft. Let's try it again. Awesome. So it says, "Good day from Google I/O stage 7 as we expected." So we want to test it with our alpha users and see if they are going to like this response instead of the previous version. And also, please note that you can see all your versions here and test them to see the difference. So I'll just click done. I'll go ahead and click on the release tab now. And on the release tab, let's push this version into our alpha testers. So while my production and beta remains like a different welcome that says welcome to Trailblazer, our alpha is going to be taking this version and changing the welcome response. So we just need to click that we tested it in simulator. We gone through the checklist and we are complying with policies. And once we submit, this is going to run our pre-submit checks and will be done in few seconds. And while it is doing that, oh, it's already done. So you can see now that our version will be in deploying state. Perfect. So we created version 7, and now it's being in the deploying state, and it will be deployed just in few hours and live to your testers. But how do we invite our own testers? You'll see a manage alpha testers. And same applies to beta, by the way. The only difference, if we did beta, we would see the status as under review. So we'll go ahead and click on manage testers. So in this section, you can add your own testers to make sure they are whitelisted to receive your alpha version. So we can add this to my list. And I already had some other emails before. And once I hit save, all these users are whitelisted to get my alpha version. Just a couple things to note here. The users you are adding should have valid Google account, either Gmail or Google Apps user. Otherwise, you would see that a validation would fail, and you can remove and add new users. So the last step as a developer for you is to invite your own testers. So you see in here, there is an opt-in link. And this is static link that directs users to your directory page. So if your users already using your action in their mobile, they can just search your action name, like Trailblazer, and they would see your invitation in the action directory page. But if they are not familiar with that, you can just share this link, and once they click this link on their mobile phone, either iOS or Android, they would land into your directory. Let's see how that experience looks like. Let's go back to our slides. Perfect. So we now created an alpha release. And we took the opt-in link, shared with our tester. So the first screen here is the place they land in. So this is my action directory page on mobile. And when they scroll down, they see that the invitation that I added them to my beta, or same applies to alpha. And once they are all OK to be your alpha tester, they say, I'm in. And after that point, they will start talking to your test version. And at any time, they can opt out, or they can switch between alpha and beta if you invited them to both channels. How cool is that? This was something, this feature was a top developer request, and we are so excited to actually make it happen. So let's recap what we have been doing so far. So Jane built her Trailblazer action with Dialogflow. She tested locally with simulator. And also, she was able to test it with her own device that was connected to her preview account. And she wrote her unit test by using automated testing library. And once everything was green, she moved it to her teammates and made an alpha release. Her teammates gave her a feedback, and she was able to iterate and make her actions more stable. And then she released it to her beta testers to more wider audience. And once she made sure her actions are stable, she is ready to go for production. But before going to production, I would like to share some best practices while you are testing your actions. So as a developer, we always think about end-to-end journeys and try to capture those use cases in our test. But what does it even mean in a conversational space? So in assistant world, your users may be in multiple modes. And these modes are determined by input and output of your device. So if a user is talking to Trailblazer in Google Home, they would only get voice. But if they are talking to Trailblazer on their mobile phone, not only they would get voice, but they would also get image of the nearby bike trails. So as a developer, it's important to think about where our users may be interacting with our actions and handle these test cases accordingly to make sure their experience is smooth in all devices that actions are offered. And the second important point is to make sure your users are able to enter your actions. So it's good to test your invocations. They can invoke your app in multiple ways, either explicitly by saying, talk to Trailblazer, ask Trailblazer, or you may also have some built-in intents or some implicit invocation that may be triggered in different way. Let's say play a game, or find the nearby bike trails. So actions on Google today are offered in multiple languages. And it becomes even more important to test your users' languages in a conversational world. So this is a great one to be able to test programmatically by using unit tests or in simulator, as well as you can offer your alpha and beta environments to the users that speaks one of these languages and see if they can navigate. And same applies to location. Today, Nick pointed out that in simulator, you are able to change the location and see how your action responds back. And Actions on Google offers multiple functionalities to developers, like facilitated payments, account linking, re-engagement, order updates, push notifications. Some of these may be hard to test programmatically. For example, let's take payment as an example. So this may be a perfect use case to test with your alpha or beta testers and make sure that they can get the functionality that you want to be. And last but not least, our action may be touching into multiple stack. So Trailblazer we built not only have Dialogflow and Assistant on the client side, but we also built our own server. So it's important to make sure and handle all the cases in each of these stacks in the architecture.
All right, so you designed, built, and tested your action, and now you've deployed it to users. But it doesn't stop there. You have to continue to ensure that users have a great experience. And we have a couple of tools that help you do that. The first of which is the health analytics section in the console. And this will show you graphs for the number of errors that users are experiencing, as well as the latency. And we do periodic checks on your action. And if we determine that they are unhealthy, we'll let you know over an email. And if it continues to be unhealthy, it will actually be disabled until it becomes healthy again. So let's switch over to the demo. So here we are in the analytics page. We can jump over to health, and here's the errors that are happening. And let's go ahead and jump to over the last 3 months, what kind of errors have we had? All right, and you see that there are a couple of errors that started out a few weeks ago. We can go ahead and look at the errors themselves: invalid response, timeout, unknown error. And we can learn a little more about why these errors might be happening. We can also filter these out and see, OK, well, people might be having a different experience on a phone compared to a Google Home. And it seems like all these errors relate to mobile devices. You can also look at the latency. And you see for 50% of users, they're getting about 200 milliseconds. And that's a pretty good response time. As you jump out towards the 95 percentile, it gets a little higher. And so maybe you want to see what kind of things are happening for some of those users to help reduce that latency. And there's more graphs as well. Now, the second part, in making sure you have a reliable action, is Stackdriver. And to show you how to do that, I'm going to go back to the simulator. And we talked a little bit about finding bike trails, but there's also a bug in our action. So if I say, give me a tip, it's actually going to crash, and that's intentional for this demo. OK, so it says final response must be set. Now, you might have experienced this when you're using the simulator, but you might not know what this means. If you click this View Logs button, we're going to jump directly into Stackdriver, which is our logging tool. And it'll show all the things that have happened, all of the logs for our action. We can go ahead and filter something like errors. So we'll find all the errors that have happened. All right, you see, right now, we just got this final response must be set. There's a lot of information here. But what exactly does this mean? Well, since we're using cloud functions, we actually also log what's happening there as well. And we have this error in our cloud function. It says reference error, trail tips is not defined at index.js line 30. OK, well, let's just jump over to our code and figure out what's happening. OK, index.js line 30 it says, oh, well, this is actually correct. OK, so you might see that there's a syntax error in our index.js file. And once you figure out that this is a problem, we can go ahead, make the change, and do another Firebase deploy. And then the next time we run our tool, and through the simulator or through our automated testing, it will work as we expect. So let's jump back to the slides and recap what just happened. So with Stackdriver logging, you can examine error logs for your fulfillment. And you can filter these logs based on types of errors and anything else that you might be logging. And what's really cool is that no custom code is required. If you're using Actions on Google, you get those logs. And if you're using Cloud Functions, you get those logs as well.
Awesome. So this concludes our journey today. So let's review what we have been doing together. So it started with Jane, and Jane had an idea for an action called Trailblazer. She built that with Dialogflow. And once she was done with designing and building, she moved it to her simulator and tested locally on her device and on the simulator tool on the Actions on Google Web. And then she wrote her own unit test by using automated testing library. And once it was all good and tested, she released it to her alpha and beta testers to make sure she gets a stable action. And once she got there, she was able to deploy it to public, all assistant users. And she was able to grow her audience. And she was able to get more engagement. And throughout this journey, once her action was in production, she was able to monitor it by looking at the health analytics in Actions on Google Console or Stackdriver logging that comes out of the box, and was able to check and monitor and catch the bugs if her production users have been seeing any issues. So she was able to fix those and make sure her action was healthy. And as a result, Jane was able to get her own 5-star actions. And we want to make sure that all the tools and tips we'll share today would help you get your own 5-star actions. Thank you so much for coming. And we would love to hear from you, so if you can go and provide us feedback in this link up here, we would be so happy. And also, please visit actions.google.com if you want to learn more about the things we talked today. And Nick and I will be available after the session in Sandbox if you have any questions. And we would love to hear from you, either through our developer channels or in person in I/O.
Yeah, so make sure you follow us on Twitter, and make sure you follow Actions on Google, and use the hashtag AOGDevs.